Daniel Hartman had everything most people only dreamed of: fame, talent, fortune, and a beachside villa in Santa Barbara, spacious enough to house an entire film crew for a month. Crowned America's King of Cuisine, he was a regular face on TV, the proud owner of Michelin star restaurants, and the creator of the viral rainbow oyster that took the culinary world by storm. But what the cameras didn't show was a lonely man struggling to be a father to his three 6-year-olds, Leo, Clara, and Max, each a world of their own, brimming with energy and nearly impossible to manage. 3 years ago, his wife Sophia died in a tragic car accident. Since then, his luxurious home had ceased to be a sanctuary and turned into a sleepless battlefield. 15 nannies had come and gone, the longest lasting just 4 days. "We're not kids, we're a challenge," Leo once told a nanny, moments before she burst into tears and fled the house. Daniel didn't blame his kids. He blamed himself for being too busy, too hollow inside, and sometimes too afraid. That morning, his assistant handed him a new file, a nanny named Emily Rivera. No fancy degrees, no glowing recommendations. Just a handwritten note. "I used to be a teacher. I lost everything, but I still believe in good things." Daniel looked out over the ocean. He didn't need a dreamer. He needed a warrior brave enough to step into the chaos. He flipped to the last page of the file and signed, not knowing that everything, starting today, was about to change. Leo, the self-proclaimed leader of the Triplets, declared the mission as soon as he heard a new nanny was coming. Objective: make her quit before dinner. Clara scribbled a scare scale chart and hung it on her bedroom door, adding a red X for every nanny who had fled. Max, the quietest of the three, just nodded silently and brought out his secret weapon, a special batch of slime he called biological goo. That afternoon, Emily Rivera stepped into the house like the breeze after a storm, quiet, warm, but steady. White sneakers, a worn denim shirt, her hair tied up, and a smile that didn't flinch, even as chaos waited to test her. From the kitchen, Daniel shook his head slightly. "Good luck," he muttered. And then, the battle began. Leo rigged the birdcage to chime every 7 minutes. Clara accidentally spilled colored powder on the sofa. Max faked a fever and collapsed dramatically on the floor, calling for help. But Emily didn't scream. She knelt beside Max, placed a hand gently on his forehead, and said firmly, "That kind of temperature is only for a superhero mission." She pulled out a tiny jar of honey and whispered, "Anyone who eats a spoonful becomes as brave as a northern grizzly." Max chuckled. The slime slipped from his fingers. Instead of scolding Clara, Emily led them all to the backyard. "We're going to use this colored powder to make a rainbow mountain. Whoever makes the biggest one gets to name it." And when Leo tried to pour water into her sneakers, Emily locked eyes with him and said, "If you do that, you have to tell me a real secret of yours." Leo froze. For the first time, someone flipped the game on him and won. They spent the afternoon molding clay, smearing paint on each other's hands, and sealing a honey pact to call each other teammates instead of grown-ups and kids. When Daniel returned at 6 p.m., the first thing he noticed wasn't the smell of dinner. It was the silence, a soft, peaceful kind of silence. He stepped into the living room and saw all 3 kids sitting around the wooden table, quietly drawing. Emily sat in the middle, hair slightly tousled, sleeves smudged with paint, and a small smile blooming as Max rested his head on her shoulder. Daniel stood still for a long moment. In that instant, he knew. Emily Rivera was unlike anyone who had ever entered this house. No one in the house ever imagined that brushing teeth could turn into an intergalactic battle. "The bright-toothed defenders are here!" Emily shouted as she marched into the bathroom, holding 3 sparkling toothbrushes, one red, one blue, one silver. Each child received a light weapon and a mission: destroy alien cavity invaders in under 3 minutes. Leo dove into character, Clara provided sound effects with her mouth, and Max, for the first time, turned on the faucet all by himself. And just like that, bedtime toothbrushing became a nightly mission with 0 resistance. Emily didn't preach, and she didn't punish. She treated each child like a world of their own, not something to be fixed, just something to be understood. Leo, who used to dismantle toys just to see what's inside, was now given daily logic puzzles. From Rubik's Cubes to maze challenges on paper, he was so absorbed that he forgot to cause trouble. Clara, who used to hum quietly to herself but hadn't sung aloud since her mother passed, began singing again. She even wrote a song called "Emily is the Rainbow," with a chorus that mimicked the sound of rain. Max, who refused to sleep in his own room and camped out in the living room every night, finally agreed to go back to his bed. Emily strung soft galaxy lights across his ceiling and told him bedtime stories about Maximus, the light warrior. The house began to fill with laughter, and the strangest thing was, Daniel started hearing it. One night, after coming home late from a tasting event at his restaurant, he quietly stepped through the hallway, planning to head straight to bed. But then, from the far bedroom, he heard a little voice. "Good night, Miss Emily." Daniel froze. He couldn't remember the last time he'd heard those words come from one of his children. Since Sophia died, every night had been tears, cries for mommy, nightmares and doors swinging open again and again. But tonight, it was a good night wish. Daniel slumped onto the kitchen bench, caught between the ache of memory and the gentle promise of something new. A few minutes later, Emily walked in, holding 2 mugs of warm tea. "You need sleep," she said gently, "but chamomile is better than coffee at this hour." They sat across from each other in the quiet kitchen, the same kitchen once littered with milk cartons and rolling toy cars. Daniel asked softly, "Where'd you learn to parent like that?" Emily looked down at her mug and smiled faintly. "From not having anyone to do it for me anymore." She looked up, her eyes dry but deep, like a lake after rain. 2 years ago, car flipped on a camping trip. My parents and my little brother, none of them made it. Daniel said nothing. The kitchen fell into silence. Emily turned her cup slowly in her hands. "I quit teaching. I ran away from everything. But then, something about kids made me believe again. Believe that I could still do good, even if I had nothing left." Daniel just watched her. In his mind, the image of the woman with the honey jar, the clay animals, and the lullabies came together like puzzle pieces he never imagined fitting into his life again. And just as everything began to settle, the laughter returning, nightmares fading, and the house no longer a battlefield, life presented a new test. Not for Emily, but for Daniel. A test with no recipe, no rehearsal, and no second chance. Keeping a promise to your child. That morning, Clara twirled in front of the mirror, her pale yellow silk dress swaying with each spin. Her eyes sparkled like stars. "Miss Emily," she asked, "do I look like the autumn princess?" Emily nodded, gently adjusting the bow in the little girl's hair. "A princess, yes, but the special kind, the one who speaks in front of a crowd and isn't afraid of stage lights." Her school was putting on a performance called A Magical Autumn, a sweet first-grade play about a forest losing its colors until a brave princess brings them back. Clara had been chosen for the lead role. It was the first time she wanted to stand on a stage since her mother passed. When Daniel heard the news, he swept her up in a hug and made a promise, firm and unshakable. "I'll be there. I'll never miss your moment." Clara believed him. Emily did too, and Daniel believed himself, until everything unraveled that afternoon. At his flagship restaurant, the kitchen's gas line malfunctioned, causing a minor explosion and a complete shutdown of the space. Reporters showed up, managers panicked, staff needed direction. Daniel was caught in a spiral of chaos. He glanced at the clock. 3:45 p.m. The show started at 4. He dialed Emily. "Can you go to the school for me? Please." Emily didn't say much. She simply nodded, took Clara's hand and said, "We'll go and you'll shine." Out in the school auditorium, golden lights bathed the tiny stage. Emily sat in the front row, surrounded by cheerful parents. When Clara stepped into the spotlight, her face was small, trembling, but brave. "I am Autumn," she said. "I've come to bring the colors back." Her voice rang out, soft but steady. She performed with heart, never missing a line, even improvising when her co-actor forgot theirs. The crowd erupted in applause. And just before the final bow, Clara leaned toward the mic and whispered, "Thank you, Miss Emily, for believing in me." Emily wiped away a tear. That night, as they returned home, Clara clutched her most promising performer medal. She fell asleep curled against Emily's shoulder, still humming her favorite line. Daniel walked into the living room. He didn't know what to say. Clara was fast asleep, her head resting gently on Emily. In her small hand, the medal still glinted under the lamplight. Emily looked at him, not angry, not accusing, just sad and quiet. He didn't speak. He only nodded, turned, and climbed the stairs. That night, he sat alone in his office, the one with Sophia's photo on the bookshelf, the space he used to call the family command center. But now it was just a dark, cold room. He buried his face in his hands, not because of a ruined kitchen, not because of press, but because, for the first time, he felt like a failure. Not as a chef, but as a father. The next morning, the skies over Santa Barbara turned gray. Thick clouds gathered like a warning. A storm was coming. Daniel sat in silence at the breakfast table, coffee gone cold in his hands. Clara didn't look at him once. She spoke only to Emily, her tone polite, her face calm, but something in her eyes was different. Not anger, just quiet disappointment that sat heavy in Daniel's chest. Emily poured more milk for Leo and gently wiped Max's mouth like a mother would, effortlessly, tenderly, without waiting for permission. Daniel watched her, then watched his kids. A strange wave of distance swelled inside him, like he no longer belonged in his own home. After breakfast, as the kids went upstairs to change for school, Daniel stopped Emily at the kitchen doorway. He hesitated, then said softly, "I'm sorry for missing last night." Emily didn't look away. She didn't step back. She met his eyes. "You don't need to apologize to me, Daniel. Clara needed you there. That's all." He swallowed the excuses on the tip of his tongue. Work, pressure, emergencies, all of them stuck in his throat. Because deep down, he knew they were just that, excuses. "I don't know how to be a good father," he breathed out. "I'm good at cooking, managing, making decisions. But when they cry, I just freeze." Emily gave him a small smile. Not pity, just quiet understanding, like she'd stood in that same place before. "When Max had a fever last week, were you there?" she asked gently. Daniel nodded. "Did you hold him?" He nodded again. "Then you already did the most important thing. The rest, you learn. You make mistakes, then try again. You sit, you listen, and you stay." A loud crack of thunder boomed outside. The first drops of rain began to fall. That evening, the storm hit hard, wind battering windows, trees bending in the yard. The power was switched off as a precaution, and everyone tucked in early. Around 10 p.m., a sharp cry rang out from Max's room. Daniel rushed in. Max was sobbing, his sheets tangled, fists clutching the bed frame. "Where's Miss Emily? Where's Mommy? Don't leave me. Don't leave me again." Daniel froze. It had been so long since he'd tried to soothe his son to sleep. His hands trembled as he pulled the blanket over Max's shoulders. Then Emily appeared behind him, quiet as a breeze, and sat beside the bed. "Is Warrior Maximus afraid of thunder?" she asked softly. "Then maybe he needs a song from the light team." Max still cried, but softer now. Emily hummed a lullaby. No words, just a soft, steady rhythm like waves against the shore. Daniel listened, and then for the first time he joined in. His voice was hoarse, unsure, but real. Max calmed, his breathing slowed, and soon he drifted off. Emily stood to leave, but Daniel gently held her hand. "Thank you." She looked at him in the soft glow of the nightlight. "You're not a bad father, Daniel. You just need to be there, exactly when it matters most." He said nothing, but inside a quiet fear took root, deeper than deadlines or lost sleep. It was the fear of losing something he hadn't yet learned how to hold on to. Not fame, not success. Family in every sense of the word. Emily didn't need to say a word. She just looked at Daniel and gave a small nod. That single gesture, so quiet, told him everything. "We're doing this together." He sat on the opposite side of Max's bed. Emily held the boy's left hand. Daniel gently placed his right hand over his son's chest, matching the rhythm of his breath. No one spoke, but everything was being said through presence. Emily began to hum again, the same wordless lullaby, soft and soothing. But this time Daniel didn't just listen, he joined in, uncertain, slow, but honest. Their voices blended, stitching something fragile back together, something neither of them had dared to name. Max lay still, breathing evenly. His small face softened, the tension gone. A few minutes later, he slipped into sleep. Emily didn't rise. Neither did Daniel. They stayed seated, both gazing at the child they'd just soothed together. A warmth settled over the room, not loud or dramatic, but real, like they had just walked through an invisible door, from strangers into something far more familiar. Daniel turned his head. Emily was still looking at Max, but when their eyes met, something shifted in hers. It was no longer the look of a nanny. It was the look of a woman seeing a man, not for the role he was trying to play, but for the person he was in that unguarded moment. And Daniel felt it, not in words, not in logic, but in the way his heart slowed just slightly, beat a little deeper, because something unspoken had quietly begun. Since that night, Daniel and Emily began moving through a quieter rhythm, closer, gentler, filled with moments that didn't need words. For the kids, everything finally felt like a real family. For Daniel, it was the first time in years his heart had opened wide enough to hold something more than just survival. But just as they started to believe healing was possible, the past, like a shadow, returned without warning. That morning, Daniel was reviewing the expansion plans for his new restaurant when his phone started buzzing nonstop. Messages poured in from his assistant, the PR team, even an old friend in the industry. "Have you seen the article?" Less than an hour later, Daniel sat frozen in his office, staring at the screen. A new blog post had just gone viral, written by a food blogger who once praised his rainbow oysters. But this time the topic wasn't cuisine, it was Emily. The mysterious nanny with a hidden psychological history. The headline hit like a slap. The article claimed that Emily had undergone psychiatric treatment following a traumatic family accident. She had been diagnosed with severe anxiety disorder, hospitalized for a few weeks, then disappeared from the education field. She had been off the grid for almost 2 years before reappearing as a nanny. The post ended with a chilling question. Should someone with a mental health history be caring for children? Daniel's hands went cold. Part of him didn't want to believe it, not because it wasn't true, but because it shattered the sense of peace he'd finally begun to feel. That afternoon, as Emily arranged flowers in the kitchen, Daniel entered. His face was tense, his usual warmth gone. "Is there something you haven't told me?" he asked, voice low. Emily looked up. She sensed it immediately. "You read the article?" Daniel nodded. She exhaled, steady. "You think I came here to replace Sophia?" That question stopped him. "I never wanted to be their mother, Daniel. I never even dared hope for that. I just wanted to be near them, to listen, to play, to love them the way I know how." Daniel clenched his fists. "Do you realize what the media could do with this? They'll paint me as reckless, a careless father who put his children in danger." Emily stepped back slightly, her eyes starting to shine. "So my past, something I survived, something that never harmed anyone, is still enough to make you push me out?" "I'm scared, Emily. Scared that your past might break the fragile peace we just started building." The words fell like a knife. Emily stared at him, not with anger, not with blame, just heartbreak. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I won't be a threat to your perfect family anymore." She turned, tears slipping down her cheeks. The children ran downstairs when they saw the suitcase by the door. Clara threw her arms around her. "Where are you going? Miss Emily, you promised you wouldn't leave us." Max stood frozen, lips trembling. Leo tried to stay strong, but his voice cracked. "Dad said this was family, this was home, but the only person who made it feel that way is the one being sent away." Emily hugged each of them, kissed their foreheads, whispered something only they could hear. She didn't look back as she walked out the door. Daniel stood behind the curtain, unable to move. Everything inside him twisted. Regret, guilt, fear. and the crushing realization that he had just let go of something far more precious than he'd ever admitted to himself. After the door closed, the house fell into silence. Daniel stood frozen by the window, watching the tail lights of Emily's car disappear into the night. Inside his chest was an emptiness, formless, nameless, but vast enough to make him feel unsteady. He wanted to be angry, truly. He wanted to believe he'd done the right thing. That as a father, a public figure, he had no other choice. That he was just protecting his children. But the more he tried to convince himself, the more everything felt wrong. He wasn't sure if he was angry at Emily for her past, or at himself for using it as an excuse to push her away. There was something in her eyes before she left, quiet, shattered, yet proud, that kept looping in his mind like a sad song that wouldn't stop. Part of him wanted to run after her right now, but another part hesitated, because what if she had been right? What if the one who truly needed healing was him? Daniel sat down, head in his hands. This was no longer the story of a man afraid of bad press. This was the story of a man realizing he might have just let go of the only person who had touched the part of him he was too afraid to face. Ever since Emily left, the house had been quieter than ever. No more laughter echoing through the living room, no scent of afternoon cookies, no bedtime stories under the soft glow of a lamp. Daniel tried to live as if nothing had changed. He woke up early, made coffee, took the kids to school, worked, came home on time. But every action felt hollow, as though he were living in a house full of furniture, but missing the soul that held it all together. Clara no longer danced in the kitchen. Max returned to sleeping on the couch, saying his room was too dark. When Leo, the one who always seemed the strongest, grew silent, his gaze at his father filled with quiet disappointment. Daniel felt the distance grow between him and his children, and no matter how hard he tried, he didn't know how to bridge it. On the fourth morning, Daniel awoke with a strange feeling. The house was too quiet. He rushed to the children's room. The beds were empty, blankets folded, backpacks gone. On the table lay a note written in colorful marker, in a hand he knew too well. "Dad, if you're too afraid to fight for the person who made this house feel like home, then we'll be the brave ones this time." His heart stopped. He called their names, ran through every room, then dialed every number he had. His assistant, old nannies, the school, even the police. He activated tracking devices, checked every camera. Nothing. They had disappeared before dawn, quiet as breath. An hour later, his assistant called back. "There's a charge on your backup card. 3 child bus tickets. Destination, San Diego. Departure at 5:20. Daniel froze. San Diego, the place Emily had mentioned. The beachside school where she said she'd teach again. Without a second thought, Daniel jumped into his car. He wasn't a renowned chef now. He wasn't a proud father. He was just a man, running through traffic and fear, terrified he had lost what he should have held on to all along. At a small seaside classroom, Emily was teaching a group of children how to paint seashells. Her voice was soft, calm, like the ocean breeze. She didn't know that just outside the door, 3 little figures stood quietly, flowers in hand. Leo wore a wrinkled shirt, cheeks red from the sun. Clara hugged a bouquet of sunflowers almost as tall as she was. Max clutched his brother's shirt tightly, hair tousled, eyes bright. When Emily opened the door and saw them, she froze. Clara spoke first, her eyes wet but voice strong. "You said if someone loves you, they come back. So, we did." Emily laughed and then cried. Max ran into her arms. Leo whispered, "We're sorry for Dad, but he's coming. Please don't go again." Minutes later, Daniel arrived, breathless, shirt damp with sweat, eyes swollen from crying behind the wheel. He walked into the classroom, saw her, and dropped to one knee, right there among the tiny desks and rainbow carpets. From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box, hands trembling as he opened it. "I used to think love was a luxury, something I didn't need to survive. But you made me realize, surviving isn't enough. I want to live, really live, and I want that life with you." He looked up, his eyes wet but steady. "Will you marry me, Emily Rivera?" Applause erupted across the room. One little kid shouted, "Say yes, Miss Emily." Through her tears, Emily laughed and nodded. Daniel pulled her into his arms. The three kids rushed in, wrapping them both in a hug, crying, laughing, whole again. For the first time, their family wasn't broken. It was real. The little beachside classroom still echoed with laughter. After the sweetest, most unexpected proposal of Emily's life, the room quieted into a deep, steady breath, warm and real. Daniel remained on one knee, eyes locked on hers. He didn't rush, didn't plead. He waited, not out of formality, not for show, but for love, the kind that doesn't demand, only hopes. Emily reached out and took his hand, her eyes still shimmering with tears. But this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were the tears of something quietly mending inside her. Daniel smiled, his voice low and full of emotion. "I used to think I just needed a good nanny, someone who could keep the kids fed, in bed on time, and the house from falling apart. But after everything, I realize now, I don't need a nanny. I need a real mother for my children and a partner for myself." Emily covered her mouth, a quiet sob escaping. She nodded, just once. But that one nod made the entire room burst open with joy. The kids jumped up, hugging each other like they'd just won the lottery. "I told you," Leo shouted. "She's already our mom." He lifted Max off the ground, spinning him through the air. Clara kissed Emily on the cheek, tears mingling with laughter. Daniel watched them, still kneeling, looking at Emily as if she was the miracle he never thought he deserved. That day there was no rush to plan a wedding, no grand announcements, just a long walk along the beach, fingers intertwined, with three children racing ahead, laughing into the ocean breeze. A family not perfect, not traditional, but real. And finally, whole. From the moment Emily nodded in Daniel's arms, the whole world seemed to exhale. There were no more distances, no more unanswered questions, only a quiet kind of love, strong enough to stitch everything back together. They didn't promise to be perfect. They only promised to walk forward together, a little more each day, like people learning how to love all over again. That early autumn afternoon, the backyard glowed under soft golden light. There was no grand wedding, no fancy dress, no elaborate vows. Just a few loved ones, an old oak tree, string lights, and white flowers light as breath. Beneath that tree, where Sophia once sat reading stories to the children, Daniel and Emily stood hand in hand, their eyes meeting not as if this was a beginning, but a coming home. Clara, Leo, and Max had decorated the tree themselves. Lights twirled around each branch. White flowers mingled with tiny white feathers. Clara's idea because, in fairy tales, angels always leave feathers behind. The ribbons fluttered in the breeze like someone unseen smiling gently from a distance. Daniel squeezed Emily's hand. He didn't recite vows, he didn't read from paper, he spoke from his heart. "I thought I needed a nanny, someone to help me control my life. But I realized what I truly needed was a mother for my children and a partner for myself." Tears fell from Emily's eyes, not from simple emotion, but from the deep knowing that she had been seen, chosen, not despite her past, not for perfection, but simply for who she was, bruised, whole, and honest. Then came the most beautiful moment of all. The children stepped forward, each holding a handwritten note. Leo began, his voice steady but shaking slightly. "Mom Sophia was the first gift we got from the world. She was the first hug, the first lullaby, the one who taught us what family means." Clara continued, eyes gazing up at the oak tree filled with light. "She used to sit right here and tell us that if you believe long enough, magic will come. And today, we know that magic did." Max, the youngest but clearest, finished with words that made the entire garden fall silent. "Miss Emily is the second magic. No one is replaced. We just have one more person to love us now." No one spoke. Emily cried openly. Daniel pulled her close and the children pressed into the hug. Neighbors wiped their eyes. The sous chef from Daniel's restaurant stood with his hand over his heart, and the breeze blew gently, like the breath of someone, maybe Sophia, smiling from above. That day, they didn't just celebrate a wedding. They celebrated the rebirth of a family. And under the golden light of the setting sun, people believed once more that love doesn't need to be perfect, only real. A year later, the backyard was still bathed in sunlight and laughter. But now, two new sounds joined the music of life. Soft whimpers and sweet little coos from Oliver and Ava. The twins born one early summer morning, just as the light touched the wooden window frame. Emily sat beneath the old oak tree, the same tree that had witnessed goodbyes, reunions, and wedding vows. Now it was the most peaceful place in the world. In her arms, Ava slept soundly, one tiny hand curled around her mother's finger. Beside her, Daniel cradled Oliver, gently rocking him while watching the scene before him, Clara reading aloud to Max, and Leo building a seashell city on the grass. The breeze rustled through the leaves, sunlight filtered through like golden dust, tiny specks of magic floating in the air. Daniel turned to Emily and took her hand. He didn't need many words. His eyes already held gratitude, tenderness, and something even deeper than love. But still, in a quiet, steady voice, he said, "I once thought my happiness ended the day Sophia left, but you showed me happiness doesn't end. It pauses. And you made it start again." Emily tightened her grip on his hand. Tears slid down her cheeks, not from sorrow but from a joy so full her heart couldn't hold it all. From across the yard, Leo shouted, "Mom! Dad! Look! The city has a park and a library!" Daniel chuckled. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. And beneath that old oak tree, again, but without any pain, they sat there, a family that was finally whole. Not the end of a chapter, but the beginning of a new one. Gentle, complete, and so true. No one ever wanted to close the book.